This happened hours before the body was discarded. The family goes by scene with a stroller. According to the indictment by prosecutor Carlos Riera, in that stroller they carry the body of Priscila Leguiza Lafuente minutes before discarding it in a stream in Verazategui.
Yes, it's like that. It's terrible.
Priscila Leguiza had grown up with her father during her first 7 years of life, longing for the day when she could reunite with her mother and younger siblings whom she hadn't seen for years. In January of the year 2014, that longing became a reality. Silvia Beatriz Lafuente, her 37-year-old mother, showed up at the door of the house in Quilmes, province of Buenos Aires, and promised to take her to meet her older siblings. The little girl was excited, but her father had a bad feeling about all of this. Why did the woman suddenly appear after so many years of abandonment? Despite his refusal, the girl insisted on going with her biological mother, promising that she would return home that very night, that she would only leave for a little while. The man couldn't destroy his daughter's fantasy and agreed without knowing that it would be the last time he would see her smile. And as the hours passed, the sun went down, giving way to the darkness of the night, and the little girl never came back. Days later, the woman confessed that the little girl had disappeared. Desperate, the father embarked on a tireless search, fearing that someone had taken his little girl's freedom. But what he couldn't imagine at that moment was that the reunion with his beloved daughter would come in the most painful way possible. What happened to Priscila? Well, the truth behind her story is so disturbing that it will leave you horrified. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Priscila's life story was dramatic from the start. Her mother gave birth to her in a patrol car and from that moment never wanted to take care of her. Shortly after her birth, her parents broke up and agreed to split their 6 children. They lived 3 with each of them, so the girl was raised by her father, Gabriel Leguiza, and 2 of her 5 siblings.
And the mother had the girl in a patrol car. Then afterwards she had no problem. I don't know what. She took her to the grandmother had her. Then she took her from the grandmother and came and gave her to the father. So from that moment we took charge.
While it was painful for the little girl not to have her mother's care, at her year and a few months, she found that love in her father's partner, who loved her as if she were her own daughter, her own blood. The woman raised her, changed her diapers, fed her, vaccinated her and her siblings, and took them to school, something her biological mother had never done for them. So the years passed and she barely had contact with her biological mother twice at most. In fact, the little girl didn't recognize her as her mom, but as Sylvia. Years later, this would be one of the triggers for her tragic end. How is it possible that a girl who barely knew her biological mother would call her mom? At 7 years old, on a day like any other, the woman appeared at the door of her home with the supposed intention of reconnecting with her. At first, the father thought she might have regretted it and finally realized how valuable his little girl was. But then he opposed it because after all, that woman was a stranger to the little girl. She, the girl, for the opportunity to go with her mother, was full of hope to meet her older siblings and eager to play and spend time with them. So, faced with his daughter's obvious enthusiasm, the father finally decided to accept the proposal, but only on the condition that they return that same night.
Why does the mother take her when the girl was used to living with the father? We asked, did she take her to kill her?
Days went by with no news of the young girl. The father was desperate. He didn't know the address of his ex-wife or her phone number. And this is where I asked myself, how do you let your little girl go with a stranger without having contact? Complicated, but oh well. Fearing the worst, he showed up at the police station in his city to file a report, to no one's surprise. They didn't want to take his report. If she was with her mom, then the girl wasn't in danger. But the authorities didn't know that this woman was a monster disguised as a mother. Everything got worse when the authorities showed up at her door to look for clues about Priscila's whereabouts. It turned out that this monster had filed the missing person report, the biological mother. She played the role of a distressed mother perfectly. She went out searching for her daughter in the city streets and participated for days in the search operations that were carried out to find her little one. However, there was something that didn't quite add up in her performance. The woman had reported to the authorities in the early hours of Monday, but according to her testimony, the girl had disappeared from her home on Saturday.
It also didn't add up that she said the girl was stolen from her home without her noticing. It also didn't make sense that the report was made 38 hours later, considering that the current partner of Priscila Leguisa Lafuente's mother is a federal police officer on preventive availability due to an incident he had of street violence where he started shooting in the street.
How had she taken so long to report the disappearance of a minor? Something didn't add up. The father and adoptive mother knew Priscila's biological mother was involved in what happened to her. On January 7th of the year 2014, 3 days after the report, Priscila appeared, but not in the way they were expecting.
Yesterday we were talking about the appearance of a body of a girl, or supposedly a girl, because they couldn't identify it. And then as the minutes went by, a story was woven that had, at least for now, for the investigation, the ending that no one expected, right?
The father's world came crashing down when that same night they knocked on his door. When he opened the door, he found many patrol cars. At that moment, he realized something was wrong with his little one. The officers gave him the least expected news. They had found the body of a girl among the grassy shrubs of the stream located on the border between Berasategui and Hudson, and they needed him to identify it. And so the most brutal moment came when he had to identify his daughter's body in the morgue. As soon as they opened the bag, he had no doubt that it was her. In his gaze filled with horror and pain, he saw that his little one had a battered and burned body. The autopsy results determined that Priscila lost her life after receiving several blunt blows to the head. From that moment on, the authorities only had 2 suspects in mind, her mother and her stepfather, Pablo Veron Visconti, 35 years old, who were instantly arrested. Although initially there were no concrete evidence to link them to the end of this little girl, the situation dramatically changed 2 months after their arrest. It was then when one of their children, overwhelmed by the weight of guilt and emotional pressure, decided to reveal the truth. The little one confessed that his mother, ever since Priscila had moved in with them, constantly mistreated her because she called her by her name instead of calling her mom. Then, on the night of horror, tensions and accumulated resentment overflowed when the stepfather began to hit Priscila with a clenched fist, and her mother, in an outburst of uncontrolled fury, brutally attacked her with a pipe, triggering a fierce aggression that ended the little girl's life in a heartbreaking way.
They punished her, they said during their statement, because she cried. She wanted to go back to her dad's house with her dad's partner.
Scared, he couldn't do anything to stop the beating. The adults ordered them to go to sleep, fearing that the same thing that happened to their sister would happen to them, so they ended up obeying. The next morning, they woke him up saying that Priscila had lost her life.
It is not known if the beating is so brutal as to cause her death on the spot or if she goes to sleep and is found dead
the next morning.
Then, with the advice of her partner's police officer, we are talking about Pablo Veron Visconti, they tried to hide and dispose of the body by trying to set it on fire.
While horror was unfolding in the community, Priscila's mother and stepfather declined to testify before the court. Both the source and Visconti refused to testify before the prosecutor as soon as the lifeless body was discovered. But 4 days later, they requested a new meeting with the prosecutor. So they were transferred to the prosecutor's office in Berazategui, and it was planned that they would be brought before the prosecutor to be questioned for the crime of aggravated homicide due to the relationship, one of the most serious crimes in the Penal Code of Argentina. However, that same afternoon, they refused to be questioned.
They didn't find him on Saturday, they didn't find him on Sunday. Why? Because the mother reported it late, not on Saturday the 4th, not on Sunday.
But on Monday the 6th, according to the experts, the girl's life was taken by blows to the head. Then they set her on fire on a grill at the house. Realizing that the body was not burning at the speed they expected, they took the remains, which were 60% burned, wrapped them in a blanket, and ironically put them in a baby stroller. This was discovered thanks to a security camera that saw when they carried her lifeless body in the stroller to a stream called Las Conchilas, located about 800 meters from the family home where they discarded it. What's even more disturbing, because that's not all, from the images, was that not only were the culprits there, but they forced Priscila's little siblings to accompany them to dispose of the body. Not only had they committed an inhumane act in front of the little ones, but they had dragged them along with them to the end.
It's incomprehensible because it's a monstrosity. Here we are facing a complete aberration of what the concept of motherhood is. The concept of motherhood basically resides in the care of the child, in the care. And here exactly the opposite has happened. Priscila's trial commenced after a 5-year delay. A cold, gloomy room. Mother's watching us. This is a murderer.
After 5 years of waiting, Priscila's trial began on February 26th of the year 2019 in a cold and gloomy room. The prosecution accused La Fuente and Veron Visconti, a former federal police officer, of the crime of aggravated homicide due to the relationship. The first of the 10 hearings featured 2 of her brothers plus her father and partner. Her father, Gabriel, told the court about his daughter's relationship with her mother, from whom he was separated. According to him, Sylvia made lightning-fast visits, hardly saw her, and the girl said that she was not her mother. The accused showed no expression during the trial, but finally broke down in tears when it was her 17-year-old son's turn to testify. The teenager sat in a brown chair in front of 3 judges who listened to him attentively. The young man asked for justice to be done and confessed that his mother only hit Priscila. The next day, when he found out that his sister was dead, his mother sent him to buy a bottle of kerosene at the hardware store, fearing that the same thing that happened to Priscila would happen to him or any of his brothers. The young man had no choice but to obey. He then recounted that the adults realized it wasn't that easy to incinerate the evidence on the home grill and began to panic, so his mother called a supposed pastor identified as Santos Doroteo Lescano for help. She had asked him for help and had confessed to him that she had taken her daughter's life, the supposed man of God. Instead, when he arrived at the couple's house and saw the scene, he advised them to get rid of the girl's remains so they wouldn't end up in jail. If there's no body, there's no crime. The religious man would have told them, and they followed his advice to the letter. The lawyer for the father of the murdered girl, Julio Torrada, confirmed that they will push for an investigation to determine the role of that mentioned pastor, who so far has not been charged by the justice system even though there is a lot of evidence against him. Also, one of Priscila's sisters, who was 22 years old at the time of the trial, affirmed before the court that Veron drank alcohol and threatened them that he was going to set everyone on fire inside the house. Those present at the trial were taken aback when also one of her sisters confessed that Priscila's stepfather tried to kill her with a knife on one occasion. And then the last to testify was Maria Juana Picasso, Gabriel's partner and Priscila's heart mother since a year and a half. She confessed that she couldn't tell the girl not to call her mom and added tearfully that they took her away and had promised that they would bring her back at night.
I'm going to meet your other siblings and I'll bring you back in the afternoon. And now they're putting the little girl in a drawer.
During the last week of February, Veron and La Fuente's siblings and nephews also testified, confessing to the judge that life in that family was violent, there were fights among them and also with the kids. For them, it was common to hear Priscila's screams and cries from the street. If they had heard the girl's screams for help, then the question here is why didn't anyone do something? Why didn't they help her?
The mother who was internally suspected in the family of beating Priscila in this house we are seeing.
In addition, Gabriel Paladino's statement was added, the doctor who participated in Priscila's autopsy, who explained that the girl had a very strong contusion on the left parietal that had formed a bruise that caused her to lose her life. Then it was the pastor's turn, who confirmed that he had talked about Priscila's end with the source over the phone. According to the man, the murderer or the person responsible called him, but in his words, he had not intervened in the concealment. You realize everything was very suspicious. There were many witnesses who knew what was happening inside the house of hell, but no one had alerted the authorities, which was the saddest thing. The last to testify were the two defendants for the murder, the mother and stepfather of the girl, who to everyone's surprise both accused each other of having ended this girl's life.
With reciprocal exits, they washed their hands, and somehow that gave way for their defenders to ask for acquittal.
The man said that Sylvia had taken her life while he was sleeping, that she then burned her and threw her into the stream, that he had never touched the body. He accused his partner of being violent and perverse, even hitting him and on one occasion also cutting him with a knife. With this statement, Visconti was disassociating himself, as you realize, from all responsibility, but instead the source blamed his partner. According to her, he had been the one who ended his daughter's life with blows, and not only had he attacked Priscila, but he hit all the children. He confessed that he was a violent man, especially when he drank, and that he occasionally threatened her and the boys with weapons. While both, as you realize, tried to wash Priscila's blood from their hands, all of society by that time was already disgusted by what they had done. Everyone wanted both of them to pay with the maximum penalty for their horrible act. So,
How do you cross the threshold? What goes through a person's mind to kill their son?
Not just anyone can do something like that. Only a person who lacks the basic and fundamental feelings of humans that define our culture can commit such an atrocity, and those are psychopaths.
since his brutal crime, his father demanded justice and waited for them to pay for what they had done to his little one. He felt destroyed because no one was going to return his daughter to him, and until a sentence was handed down, Priscila would not be able to rest in peace. In January of the year 2021, after 5 years and 6 months since the crime of Priscila, who was only 7 years old, the court decided the sentence. Silvia Beatriz Lafuente and Pablo Veron Visconti had been found guilty of aggravated homicide due to the relationship, premeditation and cruelty, and treachery, and were sentenced to life imprisonment. In fact, Lafuente also had a look of bewilderment on her face when she heard the sentence. Perhaps she did not expect the full weight of the law to fall on her head, but for Leguisa and her lawyer, what happened was the least they expected. The sentence that was carried out was the one they had requested from the beginning of the trial.
If the girl had a grudge against me, why not with me? Not with the girl, because today, if the girl was returned to me the next day, as we agreed with the mother, with this jackal, I think the girl would still be alive and we wouldn't be regretting this today.
The lawyer accompanied Gabriel, Priscila's father, at all times from the start of the process until the sentences were achieved, and so much was what they had to go through then that the bond between them became solid, and they maintain it to this day. But for the little girl's father, the case is not over. Now he seeks to have the evangelical pastor convicted for his alleged complicity with the couple to make Priscila's body disappear, which I agree with. I don't know about you, but I do think it's fair.
Well, because we are in Argentina and because justice works like this. In any normal country, the pastor should face legal consequences for his cover-up and potential involvement. I raised this issue during the trial and in my argument. After this process concludes, another should begin to hold him accountable for his clear responsibility and necessary participation in the cover-up.
A life marked by tragedy were the 7 years of Priscila until her death. Not only did they take her life, but they ruined the lives of her 5 siblings. As you can imagine, it's extremely difficult to move forward after such a traumatic event, and it's most likely they will never recover 100%. Her father had a special weakness for Priscila, and he could never recover from such a tragedy, not even when he finally got justice. And in the end, all that's left is to move forward to protect their other little ones.
Of the creatures he had with me, everything is under my charge. So I think I'm going to take care of it, and I believe nothing will happen to us. from what they lived, the nightmare he lived with those families, I think we are not going to erase it either.
We hope that justice manages to imprison all those responsible for the case and that justice is fully served, because it is incredible to think that not only a mother who should protect and give life has also decided to snatch it away, but also one of the implicated is a man of God who in theory should preach love for others and the commandment not to take lives. This contradiction, well, let's say it's particularly shocking. But remember that on Mondays on Pepe Misterio's channel, interviews are uploaded with characters who have some story to tell. For example, there's the case of Adriana, a woman who lived a quite complicated life from her youth. To give you an idea, a 14-year-old boy abused her 2 little ones. I tell you, every Monday there is an interview, and you can also follow me on my TikTok channel as Pepe Misterio. We are uploading fragments of these same interviews.